The following story was submitted by a viewer who wishes to remain anonymous. They claim the events happened in the winter of 2018 in a rental house in rural Oregon. While details have been changed to protect their identity, the core of their terrifying experience remains untouched. This is the first of 3 allegedly true stories about the horror of discovering you're not alone in your own home. The house was a steal. That should have been the first red flag. I'd just taken a contract job that required me to relocate to a small, isolated town for 6 months. I didn't need much, just a quiet place to work and sleep. When I found the listing for a 2-bedroom house for the price of a studio apartment, I jumped on it. It was an old place, built sometime in the 40s, with peeling paint and floors that groaned with every step. But it was surrounded by miles of dense, quiet forest, and the landlord, an old man who lived a town over, seemed happy to have someone just keep an eye on the place. For the first week, it was perfect. The silence was absolute, broken only by the wind sighing through the towering pine trees. But then, I started hearing it. It was always at night, usually after midnight, a faint rhythmic tapping. At first, I chalked it up to the house settling, or maybe a branch brushing against the siding. It was an old house after all, but the sound was too consistent. It had a deliberate pattern. 3 quick taps, then a pause. 3 more taps, then a longer pause. It always seemed to be coming from the direction of the large pantry off the kitchen. I tried to ignore it. I'd turn up the TV or put on headphones. But in the dead of night, when the world was asleep, the sound would find its way back into my consciousness. It was like a slow, patient knock on a door that wasn't there. The second sign that something was wrong came about a month in. I started noticing the cold, not just a draft, but a specific, localized cold spot right in front of the pantry door. Even on days when the heating was cranked up, that one patch of floor remained unnaturally frigid. My dog, a quiet golden retriever named Buster, refused to go near it. He'd stop dead in the kitchen doorway, his hackles raised, and let out a low, guttural growl at the pantry door before retreating. It was Buster's reaction that truly set me on edge. Animals, they say, can sense things we can't. One Saturday, fueled by a mix of caffeine and creeping dread, I decided to investigate properly. I emptied the pantry, pulling out old cans and dusty jars left by previous tenants. The back wall was covered in faded floral wallpaper from the 70s, peeling at the corners. The tapping seemed loudest here. I pressed my ear against the cool, papery surface. There it was, muffled, but undeniably coming from inside the wall. My heart hammered against my ribs. I ran my hands over the wallpaper, feeling for anything unusual, and then I found it. Near the bottom, almost hidden by the baseboard, was a faint, almost invisible seam. The wallpaper pattern didn't quite line up. It was a rectangle, about 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall. A door that had been wallpapered over. My blood ran cold. Why would someone seal off a door? Driven by a terrifying curiosity I couldn't control, I went to my car and got my utility knife. My hands were shaking as I carefully sliced along the seam. The wallpaper, brittle with age, peeled back easily, revealing the dark, unpainted wood of a small, crude door. There was no handle, no knob, just a small, rusty slide bolt at the top. With a grunt, I forced the bolt open. The door swung inward with a low groan, releasing a gust of stale, musty air that smelled of damp earth and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. I pointed my phone's flashlight into the darkness. It wasn't a room. It was barely a closet. A cramped, windowless space no bigger than a crawl space. The walls were raw, unfinished wood. There was a single rickety wooden chair sitting in the middle, facing the back wall. And the walls were covered in scratches. Deep, gouging scratches, as if an animal or a person had been clawing desperately at the wood. Hundreds of them, overlapping in frantic patterns. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. On the wall directly in front of the chair, someone had meticulously carved tally marks, not in groups of 5, but in groups of 3, thousands of them. My light trembled, scanning the horrifying little space. Then it fell on something sitting on the seat of the chair. It was a small, old-fashioned cassette tape recorder, the kind from the 80s. A single unlabeled cassette was inside. My mind was screaming at me to close the door, to run, to pack my things and never look back. But I couldn't. I had to know. With a trembling finger, I reached in and pressed the play button. For a few seconds, there was only static. Then, a sound emerged from the tinny speaker. It was the tapping, the exact same rhythm I'd been hearing every night. My entire body went rigid. I was listening to the source of the sound, a recording made in this very room, years, maybe decades ago. The tapping on the tape continued for about a minute. Then it stopped. The static hissed. And then, a new sound. The soft, gentle humming of a child. It was a simple, tuneless melody, the kind a young kid hums to themselves when they're playing. It was innocent. Yet, in that context, it was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. The humming went on for a few seconds, then faded. And then, a final sound, so quiet I almost missed it. A deep, raspy voice, whispering something I couldn't understand. That's when it happened. It wasn't from the recorder. The tape had ended. It came from behind me, from the kitchen. Someone was in the house. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe. A jolt of pure primal fear shot through me, so intense it felt like electricity. I ripped my phone out of the hidden room, slammed the small door shut, and scrambled out of the pantry. I didn't look back. I didn't stop for my wallet, my keys, or my dog, who was now barking hysterically from the living room. I bolted out the front door and into the freezing night, my heart threatening to explode in my chest. I fumbled for the spare key hidden under a rock, jumped in my car, and sped away, tires spitting gravel. As I careened down the long, dark driveway, I risked one last glance in my rearview mirror. The house was dark, except for one window on the second floor. In it, I saw a silhouette, a tall, thin figure, standing perfectly still, just watching me leave. I never went back. I left everything behind. I called the landlord the next day from a motel 2 states away and told him I was breaking the lease. He just grunted and said I'd lose my deposit. I didn't care. I tried to tell him about the room, about the tapping, but he cut me off, sounding annoyed, and hung up. I called the local sheriff's department. They sent a deputy to do a wellness check for my dog. They reported back that the house was empty, the pantry was full of old junk, and the dog was gone. There was no hidden room, no scratches, nothing. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Sometimes when I'm in a perfectly quiet room, I can still hear it, that faint rhythmic tapping, and I wonder, what was being counted on that wall? Who was the child humming that tune? And who, or what, was in the house with me that night? Some questions I've learned are better left unanswered, because the truth is often more terrifying than any ghost story you could ever imagine.